Can Nebraska overcome the years-long tradition of making mental mistakes late in games? Matt Rhule is identified, but can he fix? Coming up.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good morning, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts in on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Head to FanDuel.com to get started.
Okay, hello. It is Tuesday. I am Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone is here with me. A whole lot of talk on Monday, Connor, from Matt Rhule about how Nebraska needs to play with pressure. Of course, we're still coming down from the sadness of Nebraska's defeat on Friday, first defeat of the year, 31-24 in overtime against Illinois. And there is this continued need based on the evaluation within the program, and I think outside of the program too, for Nebraska players to get over that psychological hurdle that stands in the way of taking this program to another level. You know, years ago in the Bo Pelini era, there was this never-ending narrative about how Nebraska lacked an offensive identity, and whatever it did, it was like, what's the offensive identity? But how are you going to find an offense? You know, it held them back. They were they had a great defensive identity, but it held them back from winning big games. So this is the new narrative that won't go away. This is it. It was there in the first game under Matt Rhule, and in the 16th game, it's still there.
That is a great comp. Now, fortunately, this time around, like that narrative was a bit more abstract. Like, you know,
this kind of is too, though.
This is too, but you like ultimately it's going to come down to winning a close game, you know, and not that they didn't win a close game last year, but like making a couple plays in the fourth quarter. And I don't think that you're immediately over that when it happens, right? But it certainly is a gigantic weight lifted off the shoulder of the program when it does. For Bo's, you know, it was the offensive identity, but even if they did find an offensive identity, specifically the one that like Tim Beck wanted to create, people didn't like it and Bo didn't like it, you know, so they would have to do the other thing. So that was a mess. You know, there's always that push and pull with the offensive coordinator and the coach, but this one's a little bit more direct, like in theory, but it might be a little bit more ingrained and difficult to fix within the DNA of the program.
Might be more frustrating.
Yeah.
Because with the offensive identity, I think it lived through the week. And they didn't know necessarily what it was Sunday through Friday. With the inability to play in pressure moments, like I don't think they see it in practice. Clearly, they don't see it in practice. There was a moment or two in camp where Matt Rhule talked about some of this, about how the backups were playing like backups or they had a bad practice. But that's every team.
Yeah.
You can't really work on this except in games when you get to the fourth quarter of a game. Like there aren't that many exercises, I don't think, unless there's a sports psychology genius that they can bring in. There still just aren't exercises that I'm aware of you can do to simulate the pressure that Nebraska felt in the fourth quarter on Friday night or overtime on Friday night.
Well, and the worst part about it is the more it's like quicksand. The more you think about it, the worse it gets. And so it just keeps digging and digging and digging further and further until it gets, you know, seeps into the head of every single person in the program. So that's what Nebraska's up against, right? Doesn't sound that difficult.
Rhule called it a chicken and egg conversation on Monday. I think that's accurate. How do you learn to win when you've always lost in college?
Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty of winners on this team, guys who have won in high school.
Totally.
And then somehow they get into the program in Lincoln, and there's enough of that mindset that exists with the veterans that they tend to get sucked into it. And, you know, we're not necessarily seeing that with the young players. Like what they need to do is break the cycle. The cycle and break it now so that your players like Dylan Raiola and Carter Nelson and Ja'Cory Barney and the ones who are contributing here as young guys, even the redshirt freshmen. I mean, Nebraska has a new starter for a while at left tackle as a redshirt freshman in Gunnar Gatula. These are the guys who need to break the cycle. So let's listen to a little bit of what Matt Rhule had to say about this on Monday. First, we're going to hear him talk about how Nebraska plays when the game is tight. Here it is.
Characteristic mistakes, and I put that on me. That's not, some coaches come and say, oh, it's on me. No, when that happens, I'm always like, this is typically things that happen in year two. You have a couple games, and all of a sudden you have this game, you come back down, and you're like, all right, and then teach the guys, like, hey, you have to attack every game the same way in terms of your energy and effort and stay locked into the game. And then I have to find a way to get our team to, when the game gets tight, not get tight, but enjoy the battle and enjoy the competition. And I just felt really tight out there, in the second half. Except for some guys, Dylan doesn't feel tight. He's out there running around, let's go play. Some of the young guys don't, but, I think some of the older guys are, kind of like this, and then they start doing uncharacteristic things.
So I think there's a couple things there. Like the second part obviously has the pull quote, which is we have to find a way to not be tight when the game gets tight, or, whatever it is. And that's an admittance that it did happen. And he talked about it pretty much all throughout his press conference yesterday. But I was interested in sort of the idea that he laid out in the first half of that, which was, this is kind of what happens, in year two. You get up, and then you have this thing that brings you down, and then you keep going. I wonder if this is at all comparable. Like in the past, we've talked about this idea with Rhule, and I think he was taken off guard by it last year. I think he was taken aback by it, surprised by it.
For sure.
That it existed in the program.
But he adjusted quickly.
But they adjusted. But
not that it made a huge difference. They were still 1-6 or 1-5 in one score games.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
They acknowledged it, which is better than some staffs do.
Right. So now, it's kind of like, hey, the message that he's conveying is, it's okay. It's all right. Like, this exists. It doesn't have to be the worst thing in the world, even though everybody else is talking about it. It's okay. We just have to get over it, and that's obviously the tricky part of this.
I like one thing that he said there, and putting it into application, we'll see. But I like how he turned it from avoiding a negative into embracing a positive. And he said, I have to get the guys to enjoy the battle. Yeah. I think that's on the right track. I think instead of like coaching the fright out of them and coaching the nervousness out of them, you have to get the objective. You have to hammer that in to the point where that becomes more of their mindset. It becomes more of their mindset to enjoy the battle and just love what's going on, to want to be in moments that matter. Yeah. You've got to make that the predominant psychology within a good chunk of these players who impact games. It has to be above the, oh no, here we go again, or all right, I got to really focus because every move could matter in this spot.
I think they have a lot of guys, especially the older guys in the roster. And he had a moment where he was asked about sort of the voices and the leadership that are like talking, and helping the team out. And he had this sort of like long pause, and he was trying to say it the right way. And ultimately he ended up saying, hey, we just got to play better. But like what I see from some of those older guys, like, and it's not a bad thing, but I think it turns out to be, I guess, in a game is, I think they try too hard sometimes. Like I think they want it so bad. And it's 75% of the reason that a guy like Ty Robinson or Isaac Gifford or whatever are back here this year, because they wanted to see it through and they wanted to see it out. And now they know it's their last chance, and there's all that weight and all that pressure coming down on them too. And I just think they want it so bad. And this turns into these situations. And if people notice this from the broadcast on Friday night, but right after Sierra Wright got the strip sack fumble, Ty Robinson was shown on the sidelines getting after his teammates. I think there is like this immense pressure from those guys to do it and to do it the right way. And really, I think the right answer is probably just to, I don't know. It's hard to tell football players this, but like, relax, like let it all play out in front of you. And I know that's uncomfortable because guys like to have control, but man, I just don't think you can control everything.
Yeah, we talked about Ty on the show yesterday, and you could see it. I didn't see that moment on the sidelines, but you describe it, and then listening to him after the game and knowing what kind of game it was where he got double teamed a lot and didn't have the same kind of success that he did, say, against Colorado where he dominated. He really, really wants it. So he's a great example of that guy who just 6th year in the program, wants it so bad. Could be in the NFL right now if he had made that decision a year ago. One other clip to play from Matt Rhule, and this is kind of taking this thing forward and what he needs to see from this team going ahead.
Game's going to be like this, so we better get comfortable with battles. Every game's going to be like this. And we got suckered in a little bit maybe early in the year where we're up by 28-0 at halftime, and it's like, oh, okay, great, we're a great team now. I know I feel very secure that we've tried to say, hey, we're going to place better teams. But, so sometimes you have to just go through this and realize, like, we have to get really comfortable playing with 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, same kind of thing. Kind of thing. There was a lot in this press conference where it just kind of doubled back on itself. And credit to Matt Rhule. Again, it's not about the press conference. Like we know that Nebraska fans don't want him to just be good in press conferences, but he didn't ever get tired of this line of questioning. And I think that's good because he's showing patience, and he's showing patience with his team too. If he's showing it here, then he's patient in the locker room. If he had come out and some head coaches would be like this. It's Monday. They played on Friday. It's 3 days, full days later. Like they've moved on. They're talking about Purdue. They're thinking about the rest of the season. And all of a sudden here comes question after question that can get very repetitive. Like he could just say, I'm done. Like I answered this, like, let's move on. And he didn't do that. And who cares if he does not matter if he's nice to the reporters. But I think that shows that he also is probably exhibiting that kind of patience when he's with the team.
Oh yeah. I mean, he's frustrated. There's no doubt about it. But I like his tone there and throughout this was really important. It was, it's okay. We just have to do it. Okay. It's kind of like he's
talking to them again too.
Yeah. He's a dad whose kids made the same mistake over and over and over again and is sick of being angry about it. It's just, okay. We have to just calm down. All right. Let's just do this. And I think that's really important. It's a great message for his players to hear.
Yeah. All right. When we come back, we're going to talk about whether it's still realistic to project Nebraska as an 8-win team. That's next.
But first, it's Happer here, and I want to tell you a little bit about 5 Hour Energy. Well, I got a couple things going on in my life. New father. Also, we have a giant new kitchen table, and I really don't want to put it together. I don't have the energy to, and 5 Hour Energy is going to help me get to that point. Try 5 Hour Energy shot and check everything off your list. If you're like me, the list can get long. So when you head out to get supplies, don't forget to pick up some 5 Hour Energy. 0 sugar, convenient, portable size. It's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. 5 Hour Energy has flavors galore: watermelon, tropical burst, grape, berry, and plenty more. There's a flavor for everybody. You could try them all, or on the website, you could build your own 12 or 24 pack, choose the flavors, and it'll come straight to your door. Head to 5hourenergy.com. That's the number 5hourenergy.com and get some 5 Hour Energy today. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. 20% offer valid through the end of the month, September 30th on one order. Cannot be used with other promotions. Not good on subscription orders. Head to 5hourenergy.com. All right, welcome back. Let's take a look at Nebraska's upcoming schedule and how it's changed a little bit. Last Saturday, Rutgers won at Virginia Tech. They were a team that I was kind of watching before the season. Anyway, they are 3-0. Washington is coming to town on Friday. Indiana blew out another garbage can on Saturday. Charlotte. Ohio State, Ohio State, UCLA. Has looked horrible to start the season, and then surprisingly went on the road to LSU and hung with them for a while. And by a while, I mean the first half. USC has started nicely. They went to Michigan and lost in the final minute. Wisconsin did not play and hasn't looked great and got throttled by Alabama. Iowa blew out Minnesota in the second half, and their run game appears to be very back. So now that we are 4 games into the season and we've seen all these other teams play probably a half or a game or two, it's time to reevaluate. What do we think now about Nebraska's season, given that they are 3-1, they're 0-1 in the Big Ten, and the rest of the schedule looks the way I just explained it?
I think we've probably overreacted quite a bit over the last 72 hours because of the way that we saw the game end on Friday night. I think that's natural.
I agree completely, for the record. Yes.
To watch the overtime period, to watch the last attempt at a touchdown that succeeds most of the time and didn't on Friday, and then the missed field goal. That's the last thing we saw. And by we, I mean like everyone who observes Nebraska football and rides the waves with this program. So our feelings about the next 8 games, I think, are greatly impacted by those moments. And there's a temptation to be like, wow, they're going to struggle to get to bowl eligibility.
Yep.
Rhule said it a couple times. This is a good football team. Like, I think he's trying to convince them that they're a good team. Like, don't let that 10-minute stretch change what you think you know about this team if you're on the inside, based on everything that you've seen over the last 8 months. And that's probably good advice for us here on the outside too. I still think 8 wins happens. I still think there's a lot of good football ahead for Nebraska. I think there's some teams on the schedule that are playing better than what we expected when it got to October 1st. But Nebraska takes care of business on Saturday at Purdue and comes back home at 4-1. They're pretty much right where I thought they needed to be. So I still think it happens with 8 wins.
I thought,
which was my preseason pick.
Through the first 3 weeks of the season, that Nebraska was maybe even a smidge better than I thought that they would be. And it's not like they played horribly. It certainly makes you reevaluate some things, I guess, against Illinois. But it didn't knock me down a peg to where I'm like, well, now, you're going to lose to all these teams. And then you look at everybody else too, and it's just, I don't think much has changed. Like, you take your preseason opinions and then you sort of apply them to what you've seen so far in the year. I thought Nebraska would be 6-1 to start the season. They've already taken that 1 loss. I still think they can get to 6-1 before they go to the horseshoe. And I think I think UCLA is probably going to be a win for Nebraska. I think Wisconsin is probably going to be so honestly, if we're to do this whole thing again, like game by game, I think I'd have the exact same record with almost the exact same losses. Just, I didn't think they'd lose to Illinois. I thought they'd lose to Rutgers. So that'll be a tough game, and maybe it's 1 less, but I think there's ample opportunity to get there. I don't think Iowa's unbeatable, although they're quite good. And I don't think USC is unbeatable, but it's certainly it'll be a taller hill to climb.
Right. It's going to be worth reassessing if Nebraska loses to Rutgers or Indiana, which very well could happen. And if you had to make a pick today and say, what's the record going to be in those 2 games? I think most people would probably say 1-1. Like, they're going to find a way to lose one of those games. Again, maybe that's basing this on what you saw in the last 10 minutes of action, but I don't know. Indiana at home is going to be formidable. What they've done in year 1 is take the winning formula that Coach Cignetti had at James Madison and bring it to Bloomington. I heard the broadcast in that Charlotte game on Saturday morning, a comment about, or maybe this was on College Game Day when they talked, I don't know, but it was the number of players who were all conference at their previous stop. And they weren't all from James Madison. And it was a large number. They wiped clean the culture at Indiana and have transplanted one in that doesn't have the same kind of worries that you have at Nebraska about, oh no, here we go again in this moment. So that's going to be very difficult until that team starts to get beaten down by playing the likes of, we'll see what the rest of the schedule is.
Well, like, not to go on too much of a Indiana side tangent here, but I've been very interested in them for the first several weeks of the season. They've beat nobody so far, but here's the thing: they get Northwestern next week. Well, they get Maryland this week. They get Northwestern next week. Then it's Nebraska after a bye week, and then Washington, Michigan State, and then you're back to back with Michigan and Ohio State and Purdue. Like Ohio State and Michigan are the only two almost certain losses on there,
I think.
And so that, so like, I'm not a huge believer in like, oh, it's fixed and they're great and Cignetti is like a genius, evil genius or something like I'm not a huge buyer into that. But with that being said, they can win 8, 9, 10 games just by being pretty much exactly what they are right now. I can't wait to see them get in against better competition. I think Nebraska matches up fine with them. But like I'm interested. They're definitely a team worth watching down the stretch.
If you thought Luke Altmaier was a good quarterback, and I think he was on Friday night at Nebraska in a difficult environment to play, and you're a Nebraska fan, you're probably not going to love Curtis Rourke in a friendly environment in Bloomington in a few weeks. So yeah, we'll talk more about Indiana when that game comes. But I think Nebraska still has an opportunity to find 8 wins on this schedule. And
me too.
And let's just remember that was a short sample size that we're spending a lot of time talking about from Friday night.
Yep, no doubt about it. All right, when we come back, we'll discuss a new member. Well, maybe not a new member, but a member that we didn't really know about before to Nebraska's football coaching staff. We'll be back after this. All right, it's Happer for the FanDuel Sportsbook. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you could check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. It's amazing. It's live betting at its finest, and that is with the FanDuel Sportsbook. So we're going to get you started. We're going to give you a little boost to, a boost for your starter home, I guess, if you will. $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Man, there is nothing better than sitting around and just wagering whatever you feel like on NFL Sundays or in a college football Saturday. I would recommend you do that. Head to FanDuel.com and get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Once again, that's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
We are back for the final segment of this show on Tuesday of Nebraska Purdue week. I'm Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Thanks for joining us. Connor Happer is here alongside me. He's got a kitchen table to put together that you mentioned in the FanDuel read. I'm sorry, in the 5-Hour Energy read earlier. What's that all about, and how long has it been sitting in a box?
Okay, so we got rid of our kitchen table. I think it was at the end of last week, maybe like Thursday, Friday. Sold it on Facebook or something like that. And, these people came, picked it up, and I was like, well, the table, the new table is not here yet. First of all, then it has arrived since. So we've just been sitting with an edge. The empty kitchen is pretty sweet. I kind of like it. Yeah. And now it's like this work zone where we're just slowly putting chairs and this giant table together. It's been, it's a project that's going to last some time. I feel like
it can be really refreshing to just get rid of all your furniture.
Yeah,
you don't even know it, and it's like, wow, look at all this space. But good luck to you with the kitchen table. Does it look like it's going to be very difficult to assemble? Are the instructions in like 3 different books and many languages? Like what are we looking at here?
Well, it's a giant. Like we got to work on just getting it up to the kitchen, from the garage first. That's going to be the first monumental task, and then we sort of go from there. The chairs have mostly been completely assembled at this point, which is good. But we got some wood to chop on the.
And are you on your own on this? I mean, and your wife is dealing with a newborn.
No, like I am kind of chipping in when I can. Honestly, I don't know why I'm complaining about this. So
she's going to put the table together.
Well, not that she's done a lot with the chairs. She's done mostly all the work with the chairs so far.
Congratulations on that.
I know the table.
My wife's never put together a chair. I'm very happy for you that you've arrived at this situation in your life. My 13-year-old started to do it, and he can put stuff together. But a lot of times what will happen at my house is like my wife will open the box and spread everything out.
Oh, yeah.
And then just leave the room. Like, there you go. Now put it together. I don't even really have a choice to just leave it in the box because now it's all over the floor.
That sounds familiar, honestly. Yeah. That sounds a little bit like me.
All right. Monday, Matt Rhule pulled back the curtain and said, look, Brett Maher has been working here in Lincoln with our football team for the last month. The former Nebraska star kicker and punter, some debate with me about whether he was a star in the NFL because people remember a wild card game where Brett Maher played for the Cowboys and missed 4 extra points in the same game.
Yeah.
Cowboys won that game, but actually he was a very successful NFL kicker. He played 7 seasons, made more than 100 field goals in his career, 80% field goal kicker. So he's not Justin Tucker, fine, but he's a very good kicker. And he is part of the Nebraska coaching staff. So I had some idea that this was going on. I did not know that it was as significant an investment on the part of Brett Maher as it appears to be. Rhule said that he's at practice, he's in meetings, so he's doing everything that he can to help. And I guess that's comforting, but people probably would have liked the news more if we had found out that they brought him in on Monday after the Illinois debacle.
Yeah, right. Like the immediate reaction is, oh, well, he's been here. Well, he hasn't done anything so far. People always act like, you bring in a new coach and just kind of change everything overnight, especially with something like this. Coaches are there for support and to put people in the right positions. And that's pretty much the story. But with a kicker, like, the guy has to go out there and kick it. There's nothing, and there's probably no lonelier feeling than standing out there and not thinking that you're going to make it, which is pretty much every kicker on Nebraska's roster right now. How do you get over that? I don't know. You just do, just like Matt Rhule said before, when we were talking about the mental part of thing. That's what's happening. Yeah. I think with the kickers too. You could talk about it all you want. You could, go to therapy or whatever needs to be done, but like they have to just make a kick, and hopefully Brett Maher can get him to cut, because like you said, he's been in some tough times in his career. How do you pull yourself out of that? That could be a valuable thing.
They could probably get him in a uniform. I mean,
yeah, he's a small guy.
No one's going to know, right?
Yeah.
It's not surprising that Nebraska has had the drama this year and then some previous years at the kicker spot when you consider all of the issues with the mental side of football. Kicker is the most mental position in the sport. Yeah, it's frustrating as a coach like Ed Foley, because nobody's even trying to pretend like he knows how to coach kickers. Sure, he can work with them on watching video and he can go over their steps. Like, this is what you need to do. You've got to repeat your motion, but Ed wasn't a kicker. And most of these, Terrence Knighton can coach defensive linemen. Rob Dvorak can coach linebackers. He has lived that. And Ed, you're just kind of like an advisor for kickers. You don't want to coach them too much because you might screw something up that you don't know about. And you hope that they get like the training in the off season to work through all of the mechanics and everything they need to do. And then they can just come to you as a basically a finished product, and you keep them on the right track. It's good that Nebraska has somebody in the program, and this wouldn't have been possible before 2024. Yeah, you could have had Brett Maher come in, or Alex Henry, or Chris Brown, Sam Cook, Sam Cook is also a resource to the Nebraska football program, as are those others that I mentioned, but Cook especially because his son Camden is redshirting as a freshman punter in the program this year, so he has an investment. But before, you could have those guys like make a phone call, you could have them maybe send some video or something like that to a player like Tristan Alvano or John Hole in this moment, but they couldn't be on the practice field with them, and now they can, because they took the limits off coaching staff size. So Maher is in a spot that Nebraska hasn't been able to utilize in the past, and that I think is like one little bright beacon of hope in all of the sadness that surrounds the Nebraska kicker spot right now.
One more thing, like obviously the mental stuff is affecting the position. It's like you said, it's probably the most mental, like, dependent position in sports. But what I can, so that's something that, like it or not, it's kind of out of Nebraska's control at the moment. And this is also, but I don't see this anywhere else. Kickers struggle. Kickers have mental problems everywhere, but kickers don't get hurt. And Nebraska has now had multiple kickers over the last handful of years who've gotten hurt, and have derailed in some case, in maybe this case, I don't know if derailed is a strong word, but like have thrown off the vibe from that position of the season with the injury to Alvano. You go back to Barrett Pickering from a few years ago. I mean, like, multiple kickers getting injured, and we know how that season turned out when Barrett Pickering got hurt. They ended up having to use the kicker from Lead Belly, and like in a free safety who barely could chip it over the crossbar to beat Northwestern that year. Like, that was a disaster. And so you hope that it doesn't devolve into that point this year. I just, like, we're talking about multiple kickers over this short period of time at Nebraska getting hurt. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Did you know that one of those kickers, his name was Matt Waldron? I don't know if he was the Lead Belly guy. He may have been. Or
Waldock.
Oh, sorry. Waldron was a pitcher at Nebraska.
Yeah. That was a knuckleballer, so I don't know.
Yeah. Sorry. That was a bad mistake there. Matt Waldron probably could have kicked at Nebraska when he played for Darren Erstad's team, but he didn't. He played for Will Bolt? No, I don't know. But anyway, Matt Waldock went 4 for 4 as a kicker that season. So I was sitting in the media room next to Michael Bruntz of Nebraska 24/7 on Monday when we're waiting for Matt Rhule to come in, and he had a list on his screen of all of the kickers and their makes and misses over the last, that was like 20 years. I mean, David Dykes was on there. I mean, this went back to like the late 90s.
Oh yeah, I thought Jack Mitchell came up with that. Yeah.
Is it Jack Mitchell?
Okay. Was on there. Yeah.
Yeah. And the 2019 part was just comical to look at, the number of kickers that they had that year. They're not at that spot, but the thing I'll finish with this, that Maher came in initially to do, you talked about kickers getting injured, was to help those guys with their workload, because at that point they were coming out of the summer where Alvano had this surgery, and if his injury was in any way related to him, like overworking in practice or outside of practice, then I think Nebraska wanted to put a lid on that so that they didn't run into a situation with injuries because their kickers were working too much at their craft. So he got brought in for that, and now 4 games into the season, he can help Nebraska deal with the yips or whatever it might be that their kickers are struggling with.
That's a scary word. Scary word. Okay. We are out of here on a Tuesday. We'll be back with you tomorrow. If you've made it to the end of the podcast, congratulations. You've reached the end of the rainbow. Thanks for liking, subscribing, commenting on the YouTube videos. It helps the channel out immensely. We've seen crazy growth on that, so that's been fantastic this year. So this is your first listen. We got a second listen for you. It's the Locked On College Football podcast. You could check out the link to that podcast in the description of this podcast. So go click on that right now. That is the Locked On College Football podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.